Exquisite Marvin Hagler. For all time, he ranks among boxing's all-time greats. What transpired away from the limelight, nevertheless, shocked the audience. People are still disturbed by the conclusion of his story. Come explore the tragic life of the great Marvin Hagler, who was on the cusp of greatness, with us. Newark, New Jersey is the site of Marvin Hagler's birth on May 23, 1954. Even as a young boy, he had it rough. Life was rough and risky for him as a child growing up in a low-income neighborhood. There was a lot of bloodshed and crime on the streets. He and his family had to fight tooth and nail to make ends meet because they were poor. Marvin, as a young boy, had to worry about more than just eating and sleeping. The lesson focused on developing the physical fortitude to stand his ground. The turning point in Marvin's life came in 1967, at the tender age of 12. The riots in Newark began that summer. After years of animosity and injustice, the local black community and police finally clashed violently. The streets turned into battle zones as fires swept through the metropolis. Their eyes had seen enough of Marvin. In search of solace elsewhere, they bid farewell to Newark and set out for the open road. Brockton, Massachusetts was the location in question. Brockton life wasn't easy at first. Even as an adult, Marvin remained a reserved youth searching for his niche. Still, something quickly piqued his interest: martial arts. He went to the gym owned by brothers Goody and Pat Petronelli, which was in his neighborhood. They recognized Marvin's exceptional qualities right away. Despite his reserved demeanor, he practiced with an intense focus. Boxing wasn't his only interest. He was utterly fixated. "They would find a glove inside my bald head," Marvin once said. Simply said, that is my entire identity. Yes, I am living it. He learned more than just boxing techniques from the Petronelli brothers. He learned critical thinking from them, retaining composure in high-stakes situations and developing self-confidence. His development as a person and a boxer were both aided by them. It wasn't long before Marvin began to evolve. Strength training helped him. His opponents were taken aback by his development of a southpaw posture, in which he fought with his right hand front. He programmed his muscles to absorb impact and continue moving quickly. Punches barely registered on his chin after he built it up, but entering the ring was only the start. The system itself was against Marvin's victory, and he was fighting a blacklisted boxer. Beginning in 1973, Marvin Hagler embarked on his professional boxing career. He battled a local fighter named Terry Ryan on his debut. The duration of the match was brief. In the second round, Ryan was knocked out by Marvin. His powerful and skilled performance was evident from the start. Despite his promising start, Marvin was overshadowed by other fighters of his day and never got the chance to shine. His ability wasn't the issue, his risk level was. Marvin was considered a high-risk, low-reward opponent by promoters and other fighters. His talent made him a tough loser, but his lack of fame prevented him from raking in huge bucks for his backers just yet. Therefore, Marvin was sidelined and never given the opportunity to battle top contenders. Famous boxers were hesitant to fight beside him. They were terrified of coming up short against an opponent without a sizable fan base. This left Marvin in a difficult position. He continued to win fights, but he never advanced to fights with more challenging opponents. He was hindered by the world of boxing politics. Important promoters paid him no mind. Due to his frequent exclusion from main events, he had to make do with competing on undercards. For years, Marvin put up with this rudeness, yet he never once complained. He chose to fight instead. Anywhere and against anyone, he would fight. He battled in obscure venues across the country, frequently in front of unknown audiences. Those throngs might be downright aggressive at times. Regardless, Marvin arrived prepared to demonstrate his worth. "I will fight anybody," he once declared. "Time and place are irrelevant to me." No, that wasn't a simple line. Living this way was his way of life. He earned his record by fighting formidable foes in the shadows, frequently with minimal fan backing. Despite how it felt at the moment, every battle was actually a victory. If he wanted a serious chance of winning the crown, he realized he had to keep going. At long last, Marvin received the opportunity in 1979. He defended his middleweight belts against Vito Antofermo. He gave it his all in what was his first big championship bout. The majority of viewers felt Marvin had won decisively. Throughout the bout, he appeared stronger, landed more blows, and had command of the ring. It was a tie, nevertheless, when the judges declared the outcome. The audience was taken aback by the choice. Both fans and reporters were taken aback. Marvin had done everything in his power to secure victory, and yet he was once again denied the title. It was a sobering reminder that he had to battle injustice no matter how hard he tried. The draw was more than simply an unfortunate decision. That was a representation of the system that had always been against him. Marvin, though, persisted. On September 27, 1980, less than a year after that, he went to London to challenge Alan Minter to a bout for the same belts. Rather than merely defeating Minter, Marvin decimated him. There were just 3 rounds in the bout. His power, speed, and concentration were all overshadowed by Marvin. Marvin became the world's unofficial middleweight champion when the referees stopped the bout. However, there was still suffering involved in this victory. A commotion erupted in the arena following the battle. A lot of Minter's supporters were upset that a black American had deposed a British fighter and won the belt. People hurled bottles and other objects into the ring. A hasty evacuation of Marvin and his crew was necessary. It was going to be his career-defining moment, but instead it descended into anarchy. Though he had shown his superiority, the triumph was bittersweet. He had been followed to the highest level of disdain. His conflicts were about to escalate to an all-new level, and here he was thinking things were getting easier. Reign of the Warriors. Marvin Hagler became the world's undisputed middleweight champion in September 1980 after years of being overlooked, disregarded, and rejected. However, he failed to pause for joy or relaxation. He resumed his work immediately. Becoming champion was just the start for Marvin. This was his chance to show everyone that he belonged at the top. And time again, he did precisely that. On January 17, 1981, he faced Fulgencio Abomeyjias in his inaugural championship defense. An unbeaten Venezuelan boxer. As his fans had come to expect from him, Marvin fought with the passion that was characteristic of the Boston contest. In each successive round, he knocked Abomeyjias down until the referee stopped the bout in round 8. It was a technical knockout victory for Marvin. It set a high bar for the rest of his term as title holder. In the years that followed, Marvin Hagler successfully defended his middleweight belt 12 times. He was utterly dominant, he didn't merely win. The majority of his fights were short and vicious. He fearlessly confronted every opponent, never avoiding a single one. Wilfred Scipion, Juan Domingo Roldan, and Mustafa Hamsho were among the fighters who faced him and were all knocked out. A few were unconscious. We had to break up the battle since some people were cut so badly. Some people were just completely outclassed throughout the whole thing. Despite his dominance, Marvin always had a grudge toward his opponents. The time it took for him to get the chances he merited was something he would never forget. He continued to feel mistreated even in his current role as champion. He was overshadowed by more flamboyant competitors in the media's coverage. Advertisers and news outlets frequently lavished greater attention on fighters who flashed flashy smiles and had prominent sponsors. That was Marvin's expression. It was all him. However, it seems that was insufficient. There was a point during this time when his annoyance with the disrespect was evident. The ring announcer in 1982 forgot to mention Marvin Hagler's well-deserved moniker, Marvelous, when introducing him to the audience before a fight. The last straw was that. Not long after that, Marvin changed his name to Marvelous Marvin Hagler by legal means. Everyone was obligated to say it after that. To Marvin, it was about more than just a name. The key was to be acknowledged, understood, and valued. Feeling disrespected didn't derail him, rather, it inspired him. He became more deadly in the ring with every slight, missed headline, and overlooked victory. Title defenses were no longer the only purpose of his contests. Intimate in nature. Recognizance was what he was wanting, not merely defending a belt. There was more to Marvin's invincibility than simply his mental fortitude. He had an entirely unique fighting style. His fighting style was known as southpaw, which allowed him to use his right hand for leading and his left for punching. It disrupted the rhythm of most boxers because they weren't accustomed to it. On top of that, his chin could withstand tremendous force. He persisted in charging forward despite taking many good shots. Marvin also trained unlike everybody else. He had a regimented lifestyle. Marvin led a soldier's life, refusing to socialize or take lengthy rests between fights like his fellow boxers. His mind and body were laser-focused on the ring at all times. He was about to enter the ring for the fiercest and most memorable battle of his career. The long-lost ruler. Many believe the 1980s to be the most thrilling era of boxing. The four illustrious boxers at its core were the incomparable Marvin Hagler, Sugar Ray Leonard, Thomas "Hitman" Hearns, and Stone Duran's Roberto Hearns. A legendary era for the sport was shaped by their combined efforts, and they came to be known as the Four Kings. The fact that all four of them actually battled each other was what made this period unique. Top boxers nowadays typically stay away from each other to preserve their perfect records or to wait for the perfect bargain. On the other hand, the Four Kings were unique. Fights were inevitable. They skipped the years. They decided to settle it the traditional way by fighting, so they entered the ring. The result was some of the best boxing bouts ever seen by the public. Marvin Hagler was unique among these greats for another reason. When compared to Leonard, Hearns, and Duran, who all had early success and tremendous fan backing, Marvin stood out as an outsider. From the start of their careers, the others enjoyed enormous media coverage, prominent sponsorship deals, and the support of influential promoters. They appeared in advertisements. Covers of magazines featured them grinning. Their fame was undeniable. But Marvin wasn't having any of that. A modest Brockton gym, the Petronelli brothers, and an insatiable need for validation were all he had. Big contracts and easy battles eluded him. He had to overcome formidable foes in intimate settings only to get recognition. Struggle, not fame, was his stepping stone to success. Marvin continued to feel out of place even after winning champion. One of boxing's brightest stars was Sugar Ray Leonard. Beautiful, charismatic, and much appreciated by the press. Thomas Hearns was touted as a future superstar due to his devastating punches. When Duran faced Marvin, he had already achieved legendary status. People kept having to tell Marvin that he belonged. In every confrontation, he brought that resentment with him. He was competing for more than simply honors. For equality's sake, he was battling. He was well aware that the media would disregard his efforts if he committed even a single slip-up. The others would still be treated like stars even if they made a mistake. Inconsistency wore him down. Marvin had more than simply winning in mind when he competed against Hearns, Duran, and Leonard. Every time he was passed over for a chance or ignored by the media, he thought of all he had gone through. Reporters frequently remarked that Marvin fought with an intensity and determination that other competitors lacked. Marvin took great pride in making each hit feel special. In a close 15-round decision, he defeated Roberto Duran. This technical battle demonstrated that Marvin was more than simply a brawler, he was also a boxing genius. He proved his mettle to the world by knocking out Hearns in one of the most brutal and iconic knockouts in boxing history. It was more than simply defending his title when he faced Leonard. He now had his time to show everyone how great he was. Marvin had to work harder than the other monarchs to gain the same esteem, regardless of how many victories he piled up. Being exceptional wasn't enough, he realized. He was under constant pressure to improve. He needed to take charge. He had to wipe out. However, there were instances when this was still insufficient. However, he would eventually get the attention he deserved in a single bout that lasted only 3 rounds. Boxing's bloodiest night. Caesar's Palace in Las Vegas was the site of one of the most famous boxing bouts of all time on April 15, 1985. The match between Thomas "Hitman" Hearns and Marvin Hagler, which would go on to be known as The War, was absolutely spectacular. This title defense was anything but ordinary. This hit close to home. Man, this was rough. This was a very intense bout of boxing. A lot of tension built up to the fight. The two boxers promoted the bout for weeks by going on a publicity tour to 23 different cities. Initially, they held each other in high regard. Things began to shift, though, as we moved from city to city and interview to interview. That regard evolved into something else due to the lengthy travel days and continual media scrutiny. True fury. When fight night finally arrived, the two men were prepared to rip each other to shreds. The first round was supposed to be a sluggish feeling out session, so the crowd was prepared for that. It never occurred. Both combatants started throwing blows immediately. Hearns swiftly moved in, unleashing a devastating right hand. He hit Hagler square in the face with a shot that was one of his toughest ever. Hagler survived a punch that would have rendered most fighters unconscious. He made no effort to retreat. He continued to advance forward. Everyone was taken aback by that moment. What other options did Hearns have if his finest punch failed to harm Hagler? Then there were 3 cycles of unending bloodshed. Each combatant exerted every ounce of their strength. Aggression, speed, and power were the only defenses. Subsequent accounts characterized those 8 minutes as the most brutal in boxing history. Viewers were astounded by what they witnessed. No, this was more than a brawl. We were at war. After that, a horrible thing occurred. Above Hagler's right eye, Hearns opened a deep cut during the second round. His cheeks began to bleed. That hurt like hell. Marvin was completely unaware that it was occurring for an instant. The bout was halted by the referee so that the doctor could examine the wound. Then Hagler's biggest dread became a reality. For a long time, Marvin was concerned about failing. It wasn't because he lost, rather, a technical stoppage occurred, which was beyond his control. In the midst of his most significant battle to date, that dread was starting to take shape. Because of the cut, he was afraid they would end the bout prematurely, giving Hearns the victory. Marvin, though, would not stand for that. As soon as fighting resumed, he emerged from hiding like a demon. He proceeded to confront Hearns without regard for the blood. His angry blows were quick, forceful, and furious. With a devastating right hand, he knocked Hearns down after ensnaring him. Hearns' legs failed him as he attempted to stand up. Clash broke out when referee stepped in. Finally, it had ended. Hagler had triumphed via knockout in the third round. It was a riot. Reporters were taken aback. It was about unlike any other the sport had ever witnessed, full of drama and emotion. Not only did Marvin win the fight, he won big. He won by sheer force of will. "I willed myself to win," claimed promoter Bob Arum afterwards. Eventually, even Thomas Hearns acknowledged Marvin's full contribution. He claimed he couldn't take anything away from the man. "I got messed up by his discomfort. He battled valiantly. We performed an unforgettable show." The pain of loss persisted, though, even after that. The battle may have finished on a high note, but what followed was the most agonizing experience of his professional life. This time, it was approaching quickly. Everyone forgets the battle. Marvin Hagler defended his middleweight championship against Stone Duran's Roberto Hands, a legendary figure in the sport, on November 10, 1983. This battle was more of a gradual boil than Marvin's savage war with the Hearns. It has nothing to do with aggression or brute force. It required forethought, calmness, and command. Duran was not your average adversary. There were 3 weight divisions in which he had previously won world championships by that time. He was no stranger to competing against tennis greats. He had even held his own against Sugar Ray Leonard. Hardworking, experienced, and cunning, Duran was a formidable opponent. It was clear that he would not be scared or taken down by anything. It was obvious from the get-go that this bout would be unique compared to Marvin's usual fare. Duran was not in this to throw wild punches or crumble under duress. On the contrary, he irritated Hagler through timing, defense, and mobility. Duran remained just out of reach for the whole of the battle, using his slipping punches and counterattacks to his advantage. Marvin had to alter his strategy, as he typically defeated opponents by relentless aggression. Using force alone would not have won him this battle, he knew that from the start. He needed to be astute. He had to be calm and collected. He went ahead and did it. The two fighters fought a technical struggle for 15 intense rounds. He sped up a bit, Marvin. He removed the ring, worked the entire body, and maintained composure throughout. Despite Duran's danger, Marvin never gave him the upper hand. Over the course of the fight, Marvin's better fitness level became apparent. Duran began to back off a bit, but Marvin continued to charge forward, delivering solid blows and taking the lead in the fight. Marvin may not have knocked out his opponent by the final bell, but he had outboxed and outlasted one of the game's smartest fighters. There was unanimous agreement among the judges. Marvin Hagler, the Magnificent, wins by unanimous decision. Despite its understatement, this bout was hailed by many boxing experts as showcasing Marvin's overall game. His timing, footwork, defense, and ring intelligence were all on display. As he demonstrated, he was capable of much more than simply being a violent brawler. Even against a master technician, he could prevail by playing the long game. Unfortunately, this victory, like so many others in Marvin's career, went unrecognized. His knockout triumphs received more attention from fans and media. The Duran battle, which showcased Marvin's excellence, is rarely included in highlight reels. But the battle that would put his legacy to the test and crush his heart was approaching quickly. Concealed robbery. Marvin Hagler's most controversial and agonizing battle of his career took place on April 6, 1987. He finally got his chance to battle Sugar Ray Leonard that night. After nearly 3 years of retirement, Leonard still hadn't faced a legitimate opponent. However, the bout was touted as the battle of the decade, and eyes throughout the globe were glued to the screen. This was meant to be the last impression Marvin wanted to leave behind. Duran, Hearns, and every other serious contender were no match for him. Among the four kings still to be confronted, Leonard stood last. If I could defeat him, I could put an end to all the doubters and establish my dominance. There was an obvious contrast of styles in the first meeting. Power, tenacity, and relentless pressure were hallmarks of Marvin Hagler's personality. In contrast, Leonard thrived on agility, quickness, and rapid combination. Leonard made good use of the ring throughout the battle. He remained on the periphery, launched rapid punches, and fumbled at the end of rounds in an attempt to grab the judges' attention. A brawl was not his intention. He did his best to stay alive while scoring points. As usual, Marvin advanced throughout the fight. He was the one who struck the harder blows and set the tempo. Although he lacked Leonard's prolific punching power, his strikes were devastating when they did land. He spared no effort in severing the ring and putting Leonard through his paces. It was no longer in their hands when the last bell sounded. The judges were going to decide it. Unfortunately, that's when sadness set in. Sugar Ray Leonard prevailed via a unanimous judgment. Leonard received clear instructions from one judge. Hagler was somewhat favored by another. Leonard narrowly defeated the third, who was seen as impartial, by a single round. Controversy sprang out among the boxing community. Given that Marvin dictated the pace and connected with more powerful shots, many fans and media thought he should have won. Leonard was accused by critics of stealing rounds by flurrying in the last 30 seconds, even though Marvin had performed better for the majority of those rounds. Some people thought it was theft. Some thought Leonard was merely being clever in his boxing. Marvin Hagler, on the other hand, felt betrayed. Throughout his career, he had consistently been disregarded and dismissed, yet he persisted in pushing for respect. Now, he felt the sport had stripped him of his greatest victory, even though he had finally gotten his career-defining bout. Even before the fight started, he had the impression that Leonard, the media darling, would win unless Marvin knocked him out. Marvin refrained from pleading for a rematch following the bout. The commission did not hear his grievances. With that, he departed. His now famous statement to Ray, "Get a life," was his refusal to engage Leonard in battle once again. With that, he hung up his hat. Marvin Hagler retired from boxing at the tender age of 32. Not due to physical wear and tear or illness, but because of emotional trauma. Even in the heat of battle, he maintained his enthusiasm. He no longer had trust in the system that managed it. It didn't seem like a party when he retired. It seemed as if I were betrayed. Quietly departed was one of the sport's all-time great champions. Without the opportunity for a farewell tour, a last victory lap, or the return of what he felt had been taken from him. Conflict was a thing of the past for him. The tragic conclusion. The boxing world received some unexpected news on March 13, 2021. One of the greatest boxers of all time, Marvelous Marvin Hagler, died unexpectedly at 66 years of age. He and his wife, Kay, had been enjoying a peaceful existence at their house in New Hampshire. No one had warned him or reported that he was sick. He was just present 1 second and gone the next. The terrible news was shared on social media by Kay Hagler. According to her, Marvin passed away suddenly while surrounded by loved ones. Worldwide, fans, fighters, and sports journalists were rocked by the brief revelation. This stood out during an era when tales of protracted illnesses and hospital stays are commonplace. Marvin was perfectly healthy. He wasn't going anywhere. He had since departed. At last, the last bell sounded. And it was completely unexpected. An international outpouring of love and grief ensued. Longtime fans of Marvin's fights remembered him for more than simply his knockouts and championships. They also remembered his confident, strong, and disciplined demeanor. It was more than only the loss of a great warrior for those who were close to him. Everybody who fought with him in the ring had a heavy heart since he was such a modest and devoted man. After sparring with Marvin in a contentious bout, Sugar Ray Leonard conveyed his profound sorrow and admiration. The news broke his heart, he stated, and he praised Marvin as a real fighter and champion. Also paying respect was Thomas Hearns, who had fought side by side with Hagler in the epic 1985 conflict. Even though they were fiercely rivals, Hearns always held Marvin in high regard. Sharing the ring with him was an honor, and he praised him as one of the greatest to ever do it in a social media post. Hagler was a tremendous fighter and a good man, according to Roberto Duran, another of the renowned Four Kings. Promoter Bob Arum, who was Marvin's boss while he was at the top of his game, remarked that Hagler was one of the best individuals he had ever promoted. A true gentleman, he was faithful and upright. Much of what Arum said was confirmed knowledge in the boxing world. Even when he wasn't fighting, Marvin was a fantastic athlete. When Marvin Hagler passed away, boxing felt a void in its soul. Beyond being a combatant, he had been more. His steadfastness, concentration, and quiet grandeur were exemplars. He didn't actively seek out fame, rather, it gravitated toward him. However, Marvin's ultimate goal was never fame but rather respect. Respect continued to pour in even after death. To ensure you never miss an episode of Celeb History, please subscribe, like, and bell toggle this video if you found it entertaining.